Wells, and this is Summer Scene from St. John's, and this is the first of 7 Summer Scene programs that I'll be doing, and this program is coming to you from Corner Brook, Labrador City, and Goose Bay, and St. John's, of course, during the summer months this year. Now, my guest on this program today is Kelly Russell, formerly of Figgy Duff, formerly of the wonderful Grand Band, and now on his own and running his own production company, Pigeon Inlet Productions. And by way of introduction, I'd like to read something from the July issue of Atlantic Insight magazine, which did a piece on Kelly. At 26, Russell is accomplished beyond his years. Besides the fiddle, he also plays dulcimer, bouzouki, and concertina. When he isn't performing, he teaches violin in his home, compiles and transcribes tunes, and produces albums of Newfoundland music. For him, recording the jigs and reels of his forefathers is just as important as playing them. I'd like to begin by asking you something on that note. In 1978, you spent a whole year traveling around Newfoundland collecting the traditional fiddle tunes of Newfoundland. You felt a very strong need to do that. Can you tell me something about your feelings before you made the trip and your impressions during that year on the road?
Well, Carl, the reason that I wanted to do such a trip, I became aware through playing with Figgy Duff. We travel out around the island to many of the small communities, playing mostly Newfoundland music, and began to become very apparent to me that Newfoundland music was not as popular in Newfoundland as it should be. You would think that you know, a province that has its own traditional music, everybody would be very proud of it and everybody would be playing it. But unfortunately, I found that wasn't the case. And you know, a lot of the old fiddlers, I was particularly interested in fiddle music, being a fiddle player, and a lot of the old fiddle players had stopped playing this music. I discovered that, say, 15, 20 years ago, with the coming of radio, television, a lot of outside influences, you know, the country and western music and rock and roll and that sort of thing. A lot of the younger people were sort of casting aside Newfoundland music in favor of, you know, things from the outside. So it began to look to me like we were about to lose this very valuable kind of music. So my intention was to record a lot of it. At first it wasn't good quality recording, it's just a small little tape recorder. But the idea was just to get this stuff on tape so that I could learn it myself and thus at least keep a small bit of music going.
What kind of reaction did you get from the people? How did they react to this young fellow coming in with a tape recorder asking to record fiddle tunes?
I think surprise was the first reaction of a lot of people, and shyness as well, because a lot of these people hadn't played in a long time. As I said, it had been 15 or 20 years for a lot of them since they touched the fiddle at all. Maybe pull it out at Christmas for a bit of fun, but really they hadn't played, so consequently they were very rusty, couldn't play very well. I had an advantage in that I could play, so that I would play a few tunes and that would kind of spark their memory, and oh, I know that one, and then they'd take the fiddle, and pretty soon we were going right to it.
Is there an area of the province where you got more material than others?
The West Coast, most definitely. Yeah, the Port Peninsula is very rich in traditional fiddle music, accordion music as well, and songs. And the Northern Peninsula, there's a lot of fiddle players up there too.
Did you discover Rufus Ginchard and Emile Benoit? In other words, are you responsible for them getting their initial provincial exposure? Oh,
I wouldn't say no. Both of them really were discovered. It all kind of happened around the same time. I'd say between 1972 and 1975. In those years, like groups like Figgy Duff were starting to form, and Rufus actually first came into town with the Breakwater Boys and played with them for several years, and it was through his exposure with them that I came to meet him. And actually Wilf Wareham, I have to give Wilf the credit for first turning me on to Rufus. He lent me a tape from the folklore department, and I heard Rufus, and that was actually the first time that I realized that there was really some good Newfoundland fiddle music.
So Rufus wasn't one of the people you ran into in that year in 1978 when you traveled around?
I did visit him when I traveled around, but I had met him before.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
You met him before that.
Yeah.
Now, you learned some technique from Rufus, I guess.
Well, most definitely. I've certainly learned a lot of tunes from him, and his bowing technique is quite different. Like if you were to compare Rufus Ginchard and Emile Benoit, you know, they both live on the same part of the island in Newfoundland, both on the west coast, but they're worlds apart in their styles of playing. It's completely different.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Did you yourself have any formal music training?
Not in the fiddle. I had piano lessons when I was young, so I learned to read music. So I did have a sort of a technical understanding of music, but I learned the fiddle by ear.
I see. But your formal training, of course, stands you in good stead, because you're actually in the process of transcribing.
That's right.
This material now.
Yeah. Well, once I learn a tune, I can write it down in music, and that's as a result of my early training.
Right. Was that one of the reasons why you started your production company, Pigeon Inlet Productions?
Well, I kind of see Pigeon Inlet Productions as an extension of what I did in '78 with the collecting. At that time, I was just, you know, taping people on a very inferior quality machine, and it was really almost for my own purposes, so that I could learn the tunes and have a repertoire of Newfoundland material and be able to play it myself. Whereas the thing with Pigeon Inlet Productions is actually getting good quality recordings of these people and putting it on albums and making it available to the public. So that's taking the whole thing a step further.
We've got some of your albums here. Perhaps we can show one of the covers. This is one called Tradition. Tell us about this one.
Well, that's the latest production for Pigeon Inlet, and it's the 14th album actually that we've put out. And this album, unlike all the other ones, is actually an anthology of different people. It, oh my goodness, there's everybody on it.
It says on the back here.
Yes, well, Rufus Ginchard, we were talking about Rufus and Emile, they're both on it. They do a selection each. Pamela Morgan, the singer with Figgy Duff, does a song, Newfoundland song. Figgy Duff, the group, is on it. Uncle Mose does a story. Everybody knows Uncle Mose. Lem Snow, he's a composer of songs. He lives in Lewisport. It's another octogenarian. And Lem does a song there. The group Tickle Harbour, a new group, Bark and Kettle. There's a lot of different people on it.
Now, what other things is Pigeon Inlet Productions involved in?
Well, mostly it's album production, Carl. We've had 4 albums come out this year, as well as the Tradition album. Myself and Jim Payne, who is my musical partner, Jim and I released an album, and Lem Snow has an album of all his own material. It's been mostly album production. I've done a book on Rufus Ginchard, but that's not actually a Pigeon Inlet production. That's Harry Cuff Publications has put that out.
Is writing, by the way, another talent of yours? Do you like writing?
I don't think so, not really. Rufus's book, it's just a very small sketch of, you know, a biographical sketch of his life, and it's just written in a very simple style. There's nothing elaborate. I wouldn't really consider myself a writer. No.
Your father, of course, was a great writer.
Yes, there was the writer, yeah.
So you don't think you inherited any of that writing ability?
I don't think so, no, no.
Was he, by the way, a musician as well?
No, not at all. No, Dad didn't play an instrument. He appreciated music, but couldn't play or sing or anything like that. The only parallel I could really draw is that in his writing, he preserved a tremendous amount of the old Newfoundland way of life. And I guess with me and my music, I'm attempting to do the same sort of thing, keep the old music alive.
Right.
So there's a parallel.
And of course, you have produced LPs of the Uncle Mose Chronicles.
Yes, there's 2 albums of the Chronicles of Uncle Mose.
Right, because we've all seen those in the stores. You're teaching fiddle playing now.
Yeah.
I read in this article I referred to earlier that you have performed with one of your students.
Yes, I have a student. His name is Colin Carrigan. Colin's 11 years old. He's been coming to me now for about 3 years, and he's oh gee, he can pick up a tune as quick as I can. He's quite good. I have several other students now who are up and coming as well. They're catching on pretty fast.
So the fiddle playing may not die.
I don't think it's going to die at all.
It's going to carry on if you have anything to do with it.
I certainly think so, yeah.
Right. Kelly, you did perform with the WGB.
Yes.
And you left them, and I think that had something to do with the fact that they started changing the type of music that they were playing.
Yeah, well,
can you tell us something about that?
Well, Wonderful Grand Band, when it started, we played a lot of Ron Hines' original songs, which were very much in a kind of a folk country flavor, and a lot of the traditional tunes. The album that we recorded had a lot of Newfoundland tunes that I'd learned from collecting around the island, that sort of thing. Well, the band gradually changed towards, you know, playing more rock music and that sort of thing. And eventually, I think I just felt that I'd be happier and everybody'd be happier, you know, just with the direction that things were going. I was more interested in specifically Newfoundland music and folk music.
Now, where's your own performing done now?
Well, I perform now with Jim Payne, and quite often, whenever we get the chance, with Rufus Ginchard. We just did a 5-week tour of England and Ireland, which was quite successful. Rufus enjoyed that particularly.
Yeah. Now, Rufus is 83 years old.
He is, yeah.
How's he holding up?
Well, we find it kind of hard to keep up with him, actually.
Really?
Oh, yeah. He's extremely active and doesn't show any signs of old age at all, even though he's 83. He's quite full of life.
Does he basically stick to all the old material he's known for years, or
Yeah.
does he sometimes attempt new stuff?
He has learned some new tunes lately, but he says now that he can't learn them like he used to. You know, when he was young, he could pick them up pretty fast, but maybe that's the only area in which he's slowing down. He
Right.
doesn't pick up the tunes as quick as he used to.
Yeah.
But he's made up some of his own recently.
I see.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So.
Tell us a little bit about Emile Benoit, because you played with him as well, haven't you?
Yes, yeah. Well, Emile now, completely different style than Rufus. When I play with Emile, I really have to change the whole approach on the fiddle. There's an emphasis on the down bow with Emile's playing. You know, he'll draw the bow downwards on the accent of the tune, whereas Rufus bows upwards, and it's just a whole different use of the bow. Emile is really the composer of tunes. Most of the tunes that you hear Emile play are ones that he's made up himself. He's incredible as a composer of fiddle tunes, and they're all very much in the traditional style. You know, they sound like old tunes, but they're actually his own compositions.
Yeah. You are involved with organizing an international folk festival in conjunction with the 400th anniversary celebrations.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Tell us something about that.
Well, there's quite a lot to tell with that, really. There's 6 groups coming to Newfoundland during the first 10 days of August.
Mm-hmm.
There's a group from England called the Yetis, a group from Ireland, the Real Union. There's 4 Swedish folk musicians. They play key fiddles and fiddles, and also do some Swedish folk dancing.
Right.
There's a Norwegian hardanger fiddler coming, a group from Portugal, a 14-member group from Portugal, which should be quite interesting. And let's see, who have I left out? There's a group from Germany coming, 10-member group, the Kerber group. And also we're having 30 dancers from St. Pierre and 2 folk singers from France.
We have a shot of a poster in connection with the festival on the screen right now, and this is one, no doubt, that people will be seeing all over the place in the next while. How did you go about organizing this? This seems like a massive undertaking to me.
Well, the ball was rolling on this festival actually before I had anything to do with it. John Perlin started it, sent out official invitations to, a dozen or more different countries, saying that the 400th anniversary celebrations were this year in Newfoundland, and if these countries would be willing to send a group to represent their country to Newfoundland, that we would look after them while they were here for 10 days or 2 weeks. So there was quite a favorable response. There's, as I mentioned, there's a half a dozen or more countries coming, and since that response came in, I was asked would I be interested in helping to organize this festival. So I've taken it on, and the performances will be at the first 2 performances are at the Arts and Culture Centre, August 1st and 2nd. Norway, Germany, and England will be on the first night, as well as Figgy Duff, the local folk group. The second night at the Arts and Culture Centre is Ireland, Sweden, Portugal, and Rufus Ginchard with myself and Jim Payne. And also the folk singers from France, they'll be on the first night, and the St. Pierre dancers on the second night. So they're the 2 main concerts at the Arts and Culture Centre. From there, the groups will be performing at Regatta Folk Festival on the 3rd.
They finally get outdoors.
That's right, yeah. In Bannerman Park for the annual Newfoundland and Labrador Festival here in St. John's. That'll be on the weekend, 6th and 7th. Let's see, there's also a tour around the island. The group's split up into 2 sections. England, Norway, and Germany will be going to, let's see, they'll be going to Springdale, Bonavista, Stephenville and Labrador City, whereas the other three groups, Sweden, Ireland, Portugal, and Rufus and Jim and I, they'll be going to Marystown, Harbour Grace, and Clarenville. So it gets out around the island as well, so a lot of people should have an opportunity to hear these groups.
That's quite a mixture as well. People will get an opportunity to hear all sorts of folk music from all kinds of countries.
Yeah, even the Irish and the English music, you know, are a little bit different from Newfoundland music, but certainly the stuff from Portugal and Sweden and Germany, I mean, that's bound to be entirely different. Yeah.
Sure, yeah. What sort of instruments do these people use? These other countries? Is the fiddle, for example, an instrument that's used internationally? I guess?
It certainly is, yes. Well, the Irish group uses a fiddle. The Swedish group are 4 fiddlers. Now, 2 of them use regular fiddles. The other 2 play an instrument that's unique to Sweden called a key fiddle. Actually, in Sweden, they call it a nyckelharpa. It's, you don't actually touch the strings with your fingers. You push these little wooden keys, which in turn push against the string. And there's a little short bow about this long, and you bow the strings this way. It's quite a different sort of instrument. But it is basically a fiddle, but just with some modifications.
You should get these guys together with Rufus.
Yes, well, that's the intention.
See what they think of his method of using the bow.
Well, we'll have some musicians' workshops where the visiting musicians will get together with the local ones.
Well, that's a good idea.
Yeah, and like there'd be a fiddle workshop, and all the different fiddlers from different countries would get together and compare styles. Yeah.
These concerts basically are taking place at arts and culture centres, then, are they?
Well, as I mentioned, the first 2 are. Now, out around the island, it varies. In Stephenville, it's the Arts and Culture Centre, whereas in Clarenville and in Harbour Grace, it's going to be in the stadiums there. In Springdale and Marystown, or it's a school between Marystown and Buren, they're school halls. So it depends on the particular community.
Now, when does it all start?
August the 1st is August 1st and 2nd are the concerts here in St. John's. The tour around the island starts on the 5th.
And they'll be traveling right through the entire...
Right through, yeah. The last night of the festival is on August 9th. That will be the last performance.
So will they make it up to Labrador?
Labrador City.
Labrador City.
Now, the reason it's Labrador City is because the Canadian Heritage Festival went to Goose Bay. So between the 2 festivals, both parts of Labrador have been covered.
Yeah. Well, I wish you much success with that. Will you be performing yourself, by the way?
Yes. Well, Rufus Ginchard and Jim Payne and I will be part of this as well. We'll be in the 2nd concert.
Good.
At the Arts and Culture.
Just to get back to talking about yourself again, do you do any composing yourself?
Not a big lot, no. I find myself busy enough trying to learn everyone else's music. I have made up a couple of tunes of my own, and with Jim, we do our own original arrangements of Newfoundland songs, and also Jim composes his own songs. So the accompaniments are, you know, creative. They're sort of, they come out of my own head, but they're not actually what you'd call original compositions.
So Jim Payne, is it Jim Payne?
Yes.
He's your partner.
Yes, that's right.
How did that partnership come about?
Oh my goodness, I've known Jim for years. We played together actually years ago, around 1977, between 77 and 78, just for about 6 or 8 months. And then I joined the Wonderful Grand Band then, and subsequent to my leaving the Wonderful Grand Band, Jim and I got together again, and we've been playing together now for about 3 years.
Now, is he a fiddle player as well?
No, Jim is a singer and guitarist. So he sings Newfoundland songs and has made up some original songs. And then I accompany with various different instruments, and then Jim will accompany me on the guitar when I play fiddle tunes.
Do you have any projects in mind for the future?
Oh, about...
any major ones, for example, like your tour around the province for that year in 1978?
I'd love to do more work like that. Unfortunately, there's just so little time for doing this sort of thing, and really it's not the kind of thing that generates an income. So you know, unless you can get funding from some kind of arts funding source or something like that, it's kind of difficult to make a go of it, traveling around like that.
How about that? Have you gotten any kind of help from the Canada Council? Or
the Canada Council in the past, actually, the time that I spent collecting around the island was supported by Canada Council. The Newfoundland and Labrador Arts Council has been extremely helpful in this album production business. Without them, these albums wouldn't be on the table here in front of us at all. And also, the tradition album that we showed on the camera a little while ago, the 400th Anniversary Committee helped with some financial backing to produce that.
You seem to have a good distribution system, because pretty well every record store I go into, I see these records.
They're distributed well in Newfoundland. We're working on the rest of Canada. Unfortunately, you know, they're not really commercially viable albums. They don't get a lot of airplay. They're not pushed. Consequently, sales are very minimal. Just the people who are particularly interested in folk music purchase these albums. So it's really the whole operation is kind of on a break-even level. It costs about as much to make these albums as what we get in return when they're on the market.
Just out of curiosity, what kind of music does Kelly Russell like to listen to when he goes home to relax and listen to the stereo?
Folk music from, well, particularly England and Ireland. I'm a real fan of, well, I'd have to put the Irish music first. I have a great love of Irish music. But folk music from any country, really. Like South American, Greek music.
Right. No secret stash of Frank Sinatra records anymore.
No, no.
Thanks very much for being my guest today, Kelly.
It's been a pleasure, Carl.
Thank you for watching.